here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the musician and artist Stephen Seibold, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry, all that other groovy stuff. And he formed the band Hate Dept in the early 90s and has gone on to a very interesting career in music and lots of different side projects that you'll learn about in this fascinating interview. I will put a link to his website in the notes below. But after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. Stephen, it's over to you.
Was so young. I was just a little shit. And my parents bought me a record player that the lid flipped up and it would play records. I think maybe it's 5. And my dad bought me 2 45s, was Jimi Hendrix, Burning of the Midnight Lamp, and da 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 da. I forget the name of the song. And then also Peter, Paul, and Mary Leaving on a Jet Plane. Those songs, which the 3 songs I can remember, I don't remember what was on the other side of the Peter, Paul, and Mary thing. I was completely infected by music. I loved everything my father loved, even through the 70s too, which was all that, like things like Fleetwood Mac, the Eagles, growing up with Creedence Clearwater Revival. And then my dad was kind of a progressive guy. So he would give things like Motorhead a chance, you know?
Right, nice.
He wouldn't stick with it, but he actually turned me on to. He heard Billy Idol before I did, so.
God, that must be quite a bit discombobulating because my parents, bless them, and they're lovely, but they were into really quite bad country and western, actually.
I didn't get into country and western until I was much older, and I was willing to give it a few feet of rope. But yeah, I mean, they liked stuff. He liked stuff I just flat out didn't like. It wasn't until, like we just spoke about, when I got into school and I started hanging out with different maybe kids that were troublemakers, that's when I got into the edgier side and the more experimental side of music. And I'll tell you, the records that changed my life though, yes, were Flowers of Romance by Pill.
Yep.
What's This For by Killing Joke. Low by David Bowie. Low, in the same way that I later came to really appreciate the emotion and intensity of bands like Radiohead and that introspective kind of thing. Low, I don't think I listened to Low for like almost a year straight. Only that record. I did that with quite a few records, but I studied so many things about Low just because it was so unique. And,
yes. Well, we love. Is it Dennis Davis, the drummer? His kind of that sound that he creates is just awesome. And there's a track on there on side 1, "Be My Wife," which I just think is just
my gosh,
that is musical perfection. And then the sort of, because in those days you probably had the vinyl, but then when you flipped it over, which often psychologically seemed to take an age for me, I thought, oh my God, now I'm going to discover a whole new world. It's like, my God, that is different, isn't it?
I loved that. In the same way that I used to like the sound of a cigarette lighter, of the Zippo, I liked flipping the record over.
Yes, absolutely. It felt like you were into new territory because you might have bought a record because of.
Remember lifting the arm of the stylus?
Oh yes, Jesus! I mean, absolutely.
There was something there. You're connected to the art form in that way, and I weird talking to you about it because I don't think about that stuff as much as I used to. But I used to really miss it.
then you see a little warp, and then you have to put a penny on it, and just to try and stop
Yeah.
it. That was always awesome. And then you made the mistake of lending it to a friend and getting it back completely wrecked, and thinking,
Yeah.
never lend records to anybody
I got
ever
so
again.
many. A lot of my favorite records got nicked by my friends because once I became a musician and playing a lot myself, I hung out with a lot of musician types that were kind of seedy characters, and
Yes.
they would they would just nick my favorite records.
This is always going to be the problem. Actually, it was quite interesting. You mentioned Burning of the Midnight Lamp, and then also Peter, Paul and Mary's Leaving on a Jet Plane, because there's a sort of a romantic melancholy about those songs, aren't there? I mean, the lyrics to the latter, which I think is amazing. I've heard of somebody do a version of that, but in very, like, not spoken, but it's just so sad and beautiful at the same time.
Tragic.
It was.
And that's my gig. I love tragic music.
Yes. Well, actually, one record we had, which again, we didn't get a record player in the house until the early 70s. My parents were that working class kind of couple who never borrowed money. So they'd earn it, then spend it. That was that ethos. And I think when they got married, they kind of didn't have it. They sold all their possessions. And then slowly things started to appear in the house. And the record player was one of those ones, which was and there was a couple of records. And one was the Carpenters. And I was obsessed with those lyrics, which I still am, because I think they're just so incredible. Karen's singing, but the lyrics that she sings, which obviously she didn't write them, but they kind of relate to her life. I say goodbye to love. No one would care if I live or die. I thought, Jesus, no wonder I like Joy Division and the Smiths later.
Yeah, that's just it. You just nailed it. Which is, I think, when. Maybe the gothic scene or the alternative rock scene was a lot more obvious. It just really, we all threw ourselves in the fire with that kind of darkness and tragedy, but it was always there. Even Fleetwood Mac. I mean, there's so much heartache in those songs, but they're painted up as pop songs.
Yes.
And you don't really, another artist that I always, and it was partly her voice, Alison Moyet's voice, but I was such a big Yazoo over there,
Yes.
right? Such a big fan because her voice was so emotive in that way. Her voice was so sultry and sad. And even when she went solo, one of my favorite songs is This House. And that's a horribly heartbroken song.
Yes, absolutely. No, gosh, she's just got such a deep vocal. So what was the first album or single that you went out and bought? What was that moment?
Myself.
Yes.
My first money would have been The Hurting by Tears for Fears. I bought 3 records that day with, I think, money my dad gave me. And I bought the second Tangerine Dream record. So The Hurting by Tears for Fears, which got me.
Oh, good. God, I thought it was mine, actually.
Tears for Fears was such a huge love of mine, and The Hurting was one of those records. The first time I played it, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Tangerine Dream, less so. I didn't really learn to appreciate them till later, but that was a recommendation by the clerk at the record store. And
Right.
the third record was I, Robot by Alan Parsons Project.
Oh my God, I love. Well, funny enough, 2 of those records, because my brother was 7 years older than me, so he was late 50s, so he was into prog rock, and I'd sneak into his room. It was forbidden to sneak into his room, but I would when he wasn't there, and listen to all these kind of prog rock albums, which were just fascinating. There were Genesis, Wishbone Ash, Barclay James Harris. There was Alan Parsons, there was Tangerine Dream, and and you're watching the charts, and then you think, well, that's all right. I'm I don't know, 13, 14 at the time, and then you sort of listen to these kind of really out there albums, and it was brilliant. And he also had Deep Purple and Black Sabbath records stuff, so in there. And he actually was one of those nerdy people who got the sort of sleeve to go on the outer sleeve, the plastic kind of sleeve, And I learned to go in, get the record out, put it in without him noticing I touched it, and it was it was quite good art, really, and good thing to learn how to get away with stuff. So yes, and those people like Tangerine Dream, he had an album called Ricochet, but it was Turn of a Friendly Card and Games People Play by Alan Parsons. I just thought was amazing.
And there was, oh my gosh, talk about somebody who was just so experimental and ahead of his time. Just loved what Alan Parsons did. And I'm not saying I don't now. I just, I'm sorry, my dog's drinking water.
Yes, I could. No, because I suddenly was having a bit of a, yes, because he did quite a lot on Pink Floyd, didn't he?
Yes.
That was his claim to fame. I mean, yes, that wasn't a brilliant bit of research by mine. That was just my memory playing tricks. So yes. So then, what was your first gig you went to?
I'm sorry, hey Deke, that's enough. Then my very first live concert. Again, I was a kid. I mean, I'm going to say I was maybe 11 or 12. My dad took me to see Linda Ronstadt in Hollywood. And the first concert I went to on my own was Beatlemania. I think I was 14, 15.
Right. So were you growing up in LA at this stage?
I was in Northern California in the Sierra Mountains. My parents moved away from the Los Angeles area, and we moved to a small town called Mammoth Lakes, which is a massive ski resort. And so I lived in the mountains, and living in a ski resort in the mountains is kind of strange. It's a small, tight knit, like living in a small town, but every weekend it's overrun with people from Los Angeles and Phoenix. And so, yeah, you do have a sense of living in a city, but it's only on the weekends. It's strange.
How strange. So when you got to sort of 16, do you then stay on at college at that stage, or do you leave?
No. High school in America is up to about 17, 18, right? And all of my friends were doing the punk thing. They were like in my circle. And I'm not saying I didn't like punk. I loved the Sex Pistols. I loved Generation X. I loved California punk, like Adolescence and the Circle Jerks and Black Flag and all that stuff. But I also, it wasn't really me. That's why I say it was when I heard Flowers of Romance, it was 10 times more dangerous than the Sex Pistols in my mind, because it was so experimental and outside. It's what I liked about Genesis too, and it's maybe what I liked about some of the things Alan Parsons did. Is it punk was obvious in the same way that a lot of the rock that we like, and in the same way that AC/DC is.
Yes.
But, I found that I liked punk or alternative stuff that was just really different and really challenged.
Yes. Well, I understand.
Tune or what it meant to song structure, or even the arrangements of those songs. Half the songs in that record are just bass and drums. And weird sounds. So I was pretty young when I realized that I wanted to be challenged. I didn't want to just hear aggressive music.
Yes. And then did MTV and the new romantic scene, did that sort of come onto your radar at all?
Yeah. Oh, very much. After I went through that experimental thing, Duran Duran started growing in popularity.
Yes.
I loved the musicality of Duran Duran, loved the use of synthesizers. I liked their look because their look was so challenging to the normal society, and that I was immersed in that thing. I got into a lot of different, everything from Visage. I mentioned Seafarer before. Did
you get into A Flock of Seagulls and Iran? Was that one of those ones that came onto your radar?
I wasn't huge into Flock of Seagulls, but I loved it. Their sound was awesome. They had a great guitar player, and that guy's was an amazing songwriter, is an amazing songwriter. So yeah, I loved Flock of Seagulls. Almost all of the stuff that you could put in that category from the 80s that would have been considered neo-romantic or new alternative synthesizer driven new wave, I was into it. I was really into Depeche Mode. I still love Depeche Mode. Incredible.
Yes, it was one of the bands I regret being a bit like, no. And then years later, oh my God, they're so good. And I just dismissed them.
The song songwriting. Oh my gosh. Incredible.
And then there was people like Soft Cell that came along as well, which did some great songs as well. But Depeche Mode I think they were just quite unique. But it was very hard to see when they first appeared that they were going to be this real force of nature and just an awesome band. It's always difficult, isn't it? You're never sure. I mean, Duran Duran were quite good until they did that album of covers, didn't they? Which was a monumental moment of, oh my God, they've just covered Public Enemy.
In California, there's this radio station in Los Angeles called KROQ, and they of course were famous for doing they had a punk DJ, Rodney on the Rock.
I was going to mention little Rodney.
Rodney Bingham. I loved his show, and I would tape it. I would tape it and then listen to it over and over. But the thing about KROQ or K-Rock, the way they broke and supported Depeche Mode was very similar, at least in California, in Southern California, to like the Rolling Stones. I mean, they were so popular and had become so famous by the late 80s that Depeche Mode tried to do an appearance at a record store, and it was a melee. There so many people came. It was the riot police came because people were trying to see them, and the windows of the record store got broken. The way they became like bona fide superstars was pretty alarming, at least in Southern California. I didn't know that. I knew Depeche Mode was popular and worldwide, but in Southern California, they were a unique kind of popular because of K-Rock. Everybody listened to K-Rock.
Dear old Rodney. My God, he was quite the character, wasn't he? And he's still alive, isn't he? He's one of those people who's still doing... Does he still have a radio show then?
I don't live there anymore, so he doesn't have a radio show anymore. I mean, not at K-Rock anyway.
No, he probably lives in a care home, doesn't he? No, he must be very old. But I just remember those stories of him in the 70s.
He used to put together albums, and I couldn't wait to get his albums. I forget how many he made, but he exposed.
Then as the 80s progressed, because I was a very indie pop kid, so from 83 to 87, it was the Smiths and anything that they did, which I thought was marvellous. And then we had a radio DJ called John Peel, and he had quite a wide range of sort of musical styles. So he introduced me to that Public Enemy and LL Cool J, and as well as the Bundy Boys and reggae. I mean, he just put everything into this show, and it was just brilliant. And then sort of 87. Music kind of changes a lot in the UK at this stage because, there's a sort of, I think every 5 years there's a bit of a shift. There's a new wave of 16-year-olds that come along, or 17, and they kind of want their band and they want to discover the artists and buy the first single like we all did, really. So, and it's kind of interesting. And then ecstasy also appears on the scene, the drug, not the drug of choice, but suddenly becomes quite popular, and there's a dance scene, and then bands started to sound a bit more like the Happy Mondays and the Stone Roses and Primal Scream. Sure. And then Seattle starts to appear, and we had the Pixies and that 4AD, with Throwing Muses stuff. So what was your sort of late 80s like? Because in America, I'm sure there was lots of different scenes, but we were bombarded with Bon Jovi and, glam metal, wasn't it? Big hair, big sounds.
That I never got into. Like I was already, so when I think I started writing songs when I was around 17. I'm just going to say 17 because that sounds about right. And once I started writing my own music that was influenced by Tears for Fears and Killing Joke and probably some Pistols and Pill and stuff, but I like the melodic aspects of Tears for Fears. So now, like in the late 80s now, I want to be inspired as a producer too. Like I'm recording, I buy a 4-track reel-to-reel, and I've got a couple of synthesizers, and I'm trying to learn my way forward as a recording artist, doing it myself. And so I start studying artists for different reasons. I become a massive Trevor Horn fan because
Right. Yeah.
I love the sound of his records. So that first ABC record, uh, Lexicon of Love, I believe it's
Oh,
called.
we loved it. Yes. Tears are not
That's
enough.
another record. I don't know. I put it I put it on. I don't think I took it off. I didn't. For a year, I studied the production. I studied the songwriter. Martin Fry was such an underrated singer. The songs were poppy and glitzy and everything, but my gosh, he was a fabulous singer. And Trevor Horn is still like he's still his records from uh, Propaganda to Seal. I mean, get out of here. He was the best.
Yes,
GF.
and obviously Frankie Goes to Hollywood. It was
Oh
funny because
God.
yes, and there
There's
was
another fan very influenced by Frankie Goes to Hollywood because the production was so glamorous. I just loved the sound of his records.
yes, it's quite interesting because I did, in that curiosity, I did an interview with one of the members, the woman from a band called Dollar, who were, you know, just a very easy pop band. But she was the person who asked Trevor Horn at the time, could you produce the next, you know, our next record? And he said, I've never produced anything, but I'll give it a go. And that was kind of interesting. That little thing just was the start of his career, but that was his first production number. And yes, he created the sound. I mean, there was Trevor Horn. There was another guy who had that kind of sound of the 80s, as well as Robin Miller, who was more of a jazz person. He did Sade and people like that. So
Yeah,
there was a sort of a bit of a jazz scene on one side and Trevor Horn on the other on that
I
mainstream
was
show.
heavily immersed into the Sade records. I still listen to them. She's one of the more timeless. Are you know? I'm less likely to throw "Welcome to the Pleasure Dome" on, but I'll listen to the Sade records any day, anytime. They're
Yes, well, they,
wonderfully produced, great. I love her voice, and the instrumentation all feels very real, and I like that part of it. So
it's
so
interesting.
that's what
Yes.
happened to me in the '80s. Is I started to uh, uh, listen to music for different reasons. I mean, I started to become like really aware of what it takes to make a record sound good, and I was learning how to mix a little bit. I remember I'm still a teenager, so I have my own views about what's amazing, but
Yes, well, absolutely. But then it's always good, isn't it, to be
and
definite.
I'm a huge introvert, so my friend network is starting to dwindle, and I'm getting more and more immersed in the idea that I want to make music somehow. And
Did you start listening to things like the Orb and 808 State, and there was another guy called Gerald, and that kind of dance music? Did that kind of, there was that ambient rave scene that started to appear in the late 80s,
a
and
little bit
KLF. Remember the
KLF,
KLF?
sure, I do remember KLF. Yeah, I went through my own version of that stuff. So California had its own version of that kind of electro. Certainly 808 State, I remember that, and somebody that I used to work with a lot. Who's now Claire, she was really into 808 State and tried to hit. She exposed me to more music, like all the way from 808 State all the way to later to things like Skinny Puppy and even Nine Inch Nails. She was just finger was on the pulse in a really unique way because she's really into synthesizers and guitar pedals and that kind of thing. But yeah, so in California, we had this kind of breakbeat electronic thing. It was things like the Crystal Method and um, Moby.
Oh
you know,
yes, yes.
yeah,
Moby was yeah, he was
yeah,
very much on our radar.
yeah. So it's kind of like I got into it. I was maybe a little late to it. It influenced my own. In 91 or 92, I had a band and I'd been out there playing this kind of heavily electronic industrial rock kind of crossover stuff. And then I went through some member changes and I changed the name of my own band to Hate Department. And I started making a record. I 92, I started compiling songs that sounded similar enough. And I was 100% studying music and other artists to make my own arrival as an artist. You know what I mean? My taste in music was very focused. I was not really listening to music for pleasure anymore, which is kind of sad, but it happens. Maybe have you ever written a book?
No, I haven't. This is true. Well, I've been involved in putting together a book to do with an event that I used to be part of, which took a very long year to do, but not actually written the text. We were sort of compile it and getting interviews for people. Have you written a book?
No, but I have now. I've got friends who have written book. Many friends who've written books, and a lot of friends who write in California for television. And I keep hearing the same thing that I know about record producers: is at some point you get the information in when you read a book, but you're also studying the editing, you're studying the flow, you're studying the language. The joy of putting on a new record and listening to it for the first time kind of dissolves for a record producer, because you're listening to different things. And I keep hearing the same things about authors.
Right. Got you.
The data goes in, but you're scrutinizing it sometimes at levels that don't allow you to have the joy of before you became an author yourself, or especially when you're writing for television, because you got to be concerned about pace, and you got to be concerned about delivery and reception and all that stuff.
So on your first release then, was this kind of a self-produced number that you put together?
It was. I already had a record. I put out so there was a guy in California who went by the name of Chase, and he worked for a very small subsidiary, I believe, of MCA in San Diego, California. And he, I don't even know. Oh yeah, I sent him a cassette tape. I started dwindling with this kind of skinny puppy-esque, but it had lots of flavors in it. I liked the sound of Information Society records. Fred Maher produced the Information Society. That was really, and I loved the sound of it. It was so mechanical, and the fidelity was superb. And I liked the singer Kurt Harlan. I liked his voice, real croony. And so I recorded a couple of songs and I sent it to this record label in San Diego. And he actually called me and said, I'm putting out these compilations, these CD compilations. I'd like to put this song on my compilation. That started it. He offered me a record deal, and somebody else another label in San Francisco found out that he had offered me a record label, and they argued about it for a minute. And I had a record deal to release 10 songs before I even finished the record.
Blimey.
From that one song. What a strange time that was. I'm going to say this was like 1992.
Was this the record label which was titled 21st?
That was 21st Circuit. It was my first record, 21st Circuitry.
Right. And this was Meet Your Maker.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Play on words from a line from the movie Blade Runner. Roy Batty says it's not an easy thing to meet your maker. And he's trying to extend his life. But so yeah, I finished. I made that record in my apartment on a 4-track reel-to-reel, and my couple of synthesizers that I had and guitar, and the record was confusingly well received. Like you don't make a record in your apartment, and you don't make your first record at that age and you don't think that it's gonna. I don't think anything I do is going to be well received. And that's not, I don't roll that way. It's not that I'm not confident. It's just that I know that there's a lot of legitimate music out there. There's a lot of legitimate people out there, artists with great messages, and mine are just in the mix. But that record was so well received. People loved it. And I developed a fan base. I started putting real people in the room. When we played shows, people really started coming out. And
was there quite a scene at that? Was there sort of a developing scene that you were able to be part of?
It was national. I would get phone calls from what a beautiful time, little rag magazines where people would put together little magazines on their own and make them on photocopiers, and then staple them together themselves with their own hands, and they would send them in the mail, pay the post. It was a beautiful time because people they built communities, and they built friendships and acquaintanceships through actual
Yes, I know. It was quite something, that network, really, because I think in the UK, as you realise, it's very tiny, isn't it? And every city and town would have an alternative indie night of some description. So when a band started, they could get that little bit of traction in a weekly music paper like the NME or Melody Makers Sounds, and if they were lucky, get on the John Peel show, and then you could get in the transit van and trundle around, and you'd get 150 to 200, 300 sort of, not freaks and weirdos, but, freaks and weirdos. And, sort of, the alternative kids who would just go there, because it was like £2.50 or £3, probably more £2.50 to
something
go.
to do helped you develop your identity.
Yes, and you could just go and see this band, and it was very cheap, and it wasn't going to bust the bank, was it? Let's face it. And it sort of had that grassroots sort of thing, but they then gave bands that, oh well, if we've done that, we can go and do the next thing, because there's almost like there's an incentive to do it, rather than, well, no one cares. It's like, no, they do. You need to go out there, and
That is exactly it. Is the little, it doesn't really take much when you're hungry, for me, and then most of my peers at that time, it didn't take much support and notoriety to be motivated to keep going, because by that time, after that first record, most of my peers and close acquaintances were fellow musicians and artists that were coming up through this scene, of which was early industrial, electro industrial, I guess we'll call it. But lots of rock kind of crossover.
yes, which goes terribly well until we get to Woodstock '99, and it all seems a bit. The
Yeah,
90s starts so well, doesn't it? And
it was boy, the arc of the '90s, even though they were kind of in and out of my most successful moments. I played with a couple. I played with Korn, and I played with some of those bands that were, I guess what later got dubbed new metal, but they were actually just really heavy and interesting. They were like kind of they were post punk, but it was very, very metal.
Yes, it was very, yes. So what was it like then, sort of finding your creative kind of moment to do the follow-up album? And just briefly, did you tour then much on the road with the first album? Was that quite
No, I wanted to, and we tried, but that was the most, like, the fondest memories I have it is that we made so many connections. People took chances on us. That record came out, and I was kind of like wowing at how the record was being received. And I got a call from a young woman who worked at a college in Wisconsin, in Madison, Wisconsin, and she ran a night for the college students that was this alternative music, and she made me an offer to come and play. It was they had a college budget, and so I said yes, not thinking about what it was going to take to get there. But when I hung up, thinking to myself, this is how it all starts: is I'm going to find a way to get there. The record label that I was on was very small, but he, when my car broke down, he rented a vehicle to get the band there, and we met so many people, just so many amazing, and beautiful people and I still know them. I mean, for all of the reasons that life presents, you go different directions, or you have different principles, and those relationships change. But I met people in 1994 that are making music today, are the artists themselves, that are still friends, and we have all these commonalities. That's the thing, is that network, that time of networking was just so special and unique. But it was small. It was a regional tour. We went from California. We played once in Arizona, once in Texas, no shows up to Wisconsin. So that was a brutal travel.
Yes.
The United States is massive. We played in Madison, Wisconsin. We played one show on the way home. So that tour was 4, maybe 5 shows. The United States at that time it's to tour. It just seemed impossible. How do you pay for gas? How do you pay for food for 3 or at that time it was 4 members? Just seemed impossible. But that's planted the seed. That's all I wanted to do is make records and tour. I didn't want to do anything else.
Well, absolutely. It's interesting because actually a lot of UK indie bands, often their breakup is after they've done an American tour. I sort of, they get to that point and they go, and we toured America and came back and that was it. We just
Why?
Well, it completely shattered them in that way of like being on the road. There was often issues to do with getting from A to B. Either the bus broke down, they'd have to get another one without air conditioning. They'd been together in a band for 3 to 4 years. They'd made a couple of, perhaps 2 albums, perhaps 3, doing this kind of come to drive hours to do a radio show or just go, hi, I'm on the radio, right, back on the bus and off you go again. It was that kind of, God, why did we just go and do that? But you had to do it and then play on some great gigs, some not. And the tensions in the band often by then are beginning to sort of, get that, I'm going to kill you if you say one more word. And also the great lack of money as well, to thinking,
Sure.
So there was that kind of, America was just that. It's not just like driving from London to Brighton or Bristol, which is a couple of hours at the most. It was like,
Sure. I've been. It's something you notice when you come to Europe is things are much closer together.
Yes, and it was just
Something different about me is that on my first record, I wrote and recorded everything, and I involved the guitar player because I liked him and he was a good player, but I had him replace my guitar parts because I wanted him to be involved. That has been kind of like one of my dictator personality types. I'm still that guy. If any band or any project I start, it's going to be me, and I'm going to surround myself with people I either choose to for one reason or another, or that I respect, or I want them to be in my band. But I could tour without them. So also, I see when you told me about the bands that you've known that leave Europe and come to the United States and it crushes them. I have been in bands, and bands are a nightmare.
yes,
where there's some imaginary democracy has to occur, or some shared belief system has to occur, or some shared goal has to. Fuck that! I couldn't do it.
No. I think with a lot of bands, I mean, you mentioned Motorhead very early, and I remember thinking it must have been difficult quite the first one with Fast Eddie, Filthy Taylor and Lemmy, because they were all quite equal, and then it became, well, Motorhead's Lemmy and it's the other 2 guys, and it sort of makes it a little bit more like he has to say, and I think you eventually have to have one person, like David Bowie. It's like, right, this is my project, it's not our project. I mean, occasionally you get a band where you can see when it held together for that brief moment, like say the Smiths. It was great, they all put their parts in, but then it has that problem, and
it seems like, as much as I hate saying this, but I feel it's true, that my favorite music are those things like the Smiths, where you can hear that people, maybe not, it's not about equally, because equal doesn't really exist, but it's where different people and different personalities and different energies bring together to make art together. That's the stuff that leaves the most lasting impression on me. I mean, I love Howard Jones. I'm a big Howard Jones fan, but when I go back and listen to Howard Jones now, it's not like the Beatles. When I put a Beatles record on, I could lay there and listen to it and just study the energy of it. And I'm almost obsessed with those relationships that make the art that I love, because it's always 3 or 4 people.
Yes, but yes, and they sacrificed themselves for our pleasure, didn't they? Because you realise because their relationships were going to be so damaged that they'd spend the rest of their life kind of hating each other, like the
Yeah,
Smiths.
they're all different individuals. Yeah, they spend the rest of their lives hating each other. But even today's metal icons, you got like bands like Metallica, or somehow Duran Duran is still together. I don't even, that's like blows my mind because they've been at it for so long. But they also seem like little Buddhists in their own way. Like they're way less egotistical than they were when they were younger. So I could see that they probably have to do a lot of self-reflection and
Yes,
probably
I think there's bands like the Police where you can brilliant, but the tensions are sort of amazing, and when they start having a fight, you think, oh god, that's quite for real, isn't it? As
I better get out of this room.
So, Sting gets his ribs broken, and you think, oh, that was a bit of a bad punch, And I think some bands, like perhaps U2, they made some great music, and then it's not so great. But I think they sit there on their own thinking, if I blow this, I'm going to blow a big paycheck every year, aren't I? And somehow they kind of think I just need to hold it together because my solo album is going to suck and no one's going to be interested. But the band, will pay for nice retirement and give me some nice little pleasures in life. I'll play this.
You hear the stories. They don't talk. I mean, those guys grew up together. They don't talk. But when they need to come together to make a record, like you said, and also now there's a lot of politics behind their messages too. So I could see they don't just come together for money. They come together for what they all probably agree on is good for society and messaging. And I really respect them. I loved a couple of their records I adored. I loved October and War, and obviously those are kind of seminal records. But yeah, once U2 hit their apex, I was over it.
Yes, I know. It was like, we'd got enough. But then your second album, this is like the mid-90s now, isn't it? You're obviously established. You're on another record label at this stage as well, aren't you?
So it's my story is that I've always got in bidding wars. Like, so another record label approached me for a second record because I already had been writing demos and sending those tapes around, and a few labels heard them, and I went for the most money. Neurotic Records was where I put Omnipresent out, but Neurotic was a subsidiary, it was a label that was created for Hate Department by a guy who worked there by Thump Records, which was also Lowrider magazine. They had a lot of money, and they had an art department and they had a marketing department. I went where I thought Hate Department had the best chance.
Yes, well, absolutely wise decision, actually. And were you recording in a studio at this stage, or were you still at?
They gave me, I want to say they gave me $10,000 to sign, and I used all of that money to buy better equipment, and that was part of the deal. The owner of the record label kind of brought me in and told me what their idea was to start a partnership, kind of. With me, because I'm not saying that my first record put me on the map in such a profound way that I was perceived as a hotshot producer, but in a way, some people believed I was up and coming.
Right.
That record label was one.
And they must have been sort of looking at the other music, the popular music of that time, I don't know, Marilyn Manson and various other heavy sounds. I'm thinking we've got to sign. You must have been a hot potato.
I was, and I mean, it's that's just it. You see exactly what was happening. It was culture was changing. Everybody was popping up. I mean, Skinny Puppy, 9 Inch Nails popping up. Skinny Puppy was always kind of obscure all the way up to today, but 9 Inch Nails was popping up, Marilyn Manson was popping up, things, even bands like not Power Man, was his brothers. White Zombie had their moments of what was going on. And
so was it because in our country we had the John Major years and then New Labour, and there was that moment where the 80s we didn't have, there wasn't a huge amount of money for a lot of things. I mean, there was the yuppies and people who just seemed to have money, like that class, but there was an awful lot who were just kind of sort of on that borderline. And for us, we had a lot of social security systems like unemployment benefits, which kind of helped a lot of bands at that stage because they thought, well, we'll just sign on the dole and we'll just get our £40 check and we'll get a housing benefit and we'll be in a band, and that will be, that kind of helped people just develop a bit of a time where they could concentrate on music. But then the 90s came along, and then it was this kind of, it was a lot more employment, and then suddenly people were getting more jobs because there was, there seemed to be opportunities. The 80s was a bit doom and gloom in the UK because
it was darker. Yeah, it was darker in that way. And I'll tell you something about that system in Europe and Canada too. Canada is very supportive of the arts. The government is. The United States doesn't have that. So there's a weird competitive nature in American musicians, especially ones from the street, or a lot of this stuff, music we're talking about. Nine Inch Nails. I mean, Trent was a known studio rat, and he was poor. I mean, he was not a rich kid. He worked very, very hard. All those bands. I mean, it was kind of the best part about the early industrial or early crossover synth rock crossover stuff is it was dirty and raw, and people didn't have money, and so it was very believable. It was very class believable and scene believable because it was raw, and nobody was gonna save us. We had to really be prepared to eat the rust, because that's what we had. We had nothing.
There was an interesting was it Jimmy Iovine there was an interesting documentary, wasn't there, about, was it Beats Music, or with Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine and developing beats, but his kind of background, and I think he had a lot to do with Nine Inch Nails, didn't he? He tried to sign them, and there was some sort of story about that. But
sure. Many years later, I hung out at Interscope quite a bit, and I'm not saying I got to know Jimmy, but I certainly talked to him and the different people at Interscope. And I think what happened was in Trent's case is because of the way he learned and the way he came up, he was too savvy. You know what I mean? He's a very smart guy and incredibly ambitious. When you walk into a record label, so after that record, after 1996, when I put out my second record, I was learning that record labels weren't really my friends. I'm not being mean towards them, because the opportunities they gave me were, I was very, very blessed to have those opportunities. But record labels are not your friends. Your lawyer is not your friend. And I think Trent figured that out. So even though he started his own label because he was sick of the gross parts of it, and he was enabled by Interscope's money to do so, and he signed artists he liked. I get it. I'm not saying I'm not a fan. I very much respect him, but I don't buy his records anymore. I've kind of just gone a different direction personally. But
yes,
I could imagine that him at that time, let's say that was 97, after Broken came out, he was already huge after that first record. Was that first record called again? That was so, oh God, that had like a hole on it. I can't remember the name of the record.
Was it pretty? Hate
Machine.
Yes, it did have
astounding success, astounding, and then Broken just like sent him into the stratosphere. And I'm sure he didn't trust anybody. He was
no. I think he done.
You gotta be that way. You have to be that way. You can't. No, I'm telling you, nobody's really your friend.
No,
you've got to protect yourself. You got to protect your art. You got to protect your own principles. You got to know what your principles are, and you got to stand on them. And because Yeah, someone's going to try to cut your ankles off. That's just how it is.
Excellent. And the technical difficulties then, did you start to change direction as well at this point?
Everything. There was so much more money by the time I got there. I mean, that record label, by the time I got to Restless Records, I mean, my label mates were the Cramps. Yeah, I kind of had to deliver. And I had a couple of songs. I had the demo for Release It, which they all loved and they thought it was going to be a hit. And they did the thing that big record labels do. They went around to the radio stations in LA and asked if they would play a song like that. And a couple of them gave the thumbs up. So they treated Hate Department like we were going to be up and coming. They spent a lot of money on the record. Oh, it's I got to say this too. It's weird to say the name Hate Department, because in this day, in 2025, the word hate is a lot different than it was in the 90s. Hate Department, I had my reasons for why I chose the name. But now we live in a society and culture and the landscape of humanity is hate. The word hate alone is a divisive word. So to think that Restless Records spent the amount of money they did in tour support for Hate Department, in advertising and marketing, just in making the record alone. I mean, that was my first experience in making Hate Department music in big studios. By that time, I'd already become a producer. Like, I'll tell you how I got signed to Restless. Hold on one second, because it's a good story.
Okay, yes, absolutely. I will hit pause. I'm hitting pause. I'll hit pause. Okay. Okay, I just paused anyway. But yes. So how did you get signed?
I had gotten a call from a friend of mine who owned a recording studio in Southern California, and he said, I've got the band Berlin in the studio. That was Terry Nunn and John. Oh gosh, I can't remember John's last name right now. But they were in the studio fighting like cats and dogs, calling each other names and being horrible to each other, not able to get through the material. And so this studio owner and producer, I was pretty well known at that time after my second record as being like really, I'm just gonna say affable. I get along with everybody. When I meet people, I'm always looking for things in them that I think are special and make them unique and beautiful. And I'm known for that. And this was 97, let's say. And he says, please come up here and break them up. Like,
so this is Berlin, the band who had the big hit, You Take My Breath Away. So what, and they were working on, what were they working on then?
They were working on, they just were working on new material.
Right.
And so I went up there and I met them, and I was shocked because to see artists of that caliber fighting like that was alarming, to say the least.
Yes.
Like just
was it just very dysfunctional then?
Yeah, they had a lot of history, and I didn't. Another thing I don't do this is just my personality type, is I don't take sides. I'm not apolitical. I have my political views, but I don't take. I feel like the strongest position for my type of personality is to not be on a team. So I didn't side with John or Terry. I just heard them both out, and I built relationships with both of them. But I started learning more about Berlin and the what they were doing, and they broke up. They hit a point where their insults had become so hurtful. Terry was in tears, and they split up. So I called Terry maybe a month later, and I said, "It's time for you to be Berlin. You just go to see a lawyer and buy the name. I promise the lawyer, judge will smack his little gavel and give you the name, because when you see Berlin on a poster or on the records, it's Terry Nunn. You don't see John." And I was right. She called me a month later and said, "You're right. I've got the name. I can operate as Berlin. And I said, well, let's write some songs. Let's get some songs together and make you a record. And by that time, we were becoming very friendly. I mean, and she she's such a good singer. I would sometimes cry. She was so good. I think she was just such an emotive and a phenomenal singer. And she told me about things like how "Take My Breath Away" came about, and those big hits that they had. And so I recorded 3 songs with her. I wrote 2, and a friend of hers wrote 1, and we produced them in my little studio. This was after my second record. And so I knew I was holding these tapes of Terry Nunn with the name Berlin on it. I knew I could call any record label, and they would listen to a pitch. I thought I was just going to help my friend and kind of bandmate get a record deal.
Yes.
I started shopping. I went to Interscope. I went to gosh, there was another label that really wanted her, but I went to Restless, and it was at my Restless meeting that I was young. I think I was like 22 or something, and I had a terrible punk rock haircut, and I dressed like a jerk. But I believed, I knew Terry was a hot commodity still, and they started asking questions about me. That's how Restless signed Hate Department. They were like, "Yeah, Berlin's cool. We're into Berlin, but I think we're more into this band Hate Department." They didn't even hear it. So what we were talking about before, that's my testament to record labels pay attention to what's going on with music and what's going on with trends. And at that time, Hate Department had appeal because we talked about things like The Prodigy, and we talked about things like, obviously we talked about Nine Inch Nails, and we talked about Filter. We talked about things that were on the radio at that time. And I think Restless thought it's safer to go with the Seibold guy than it is to go with Berlin, because Berlin's already a household name. It might be a harder sell.
Yes, I would have done the same. You'd have thought.
They did. They were really smart guys who were very supportive. And oh my God, the amount of money they spent trying to go through the process of the Hate Department is crazy. And I spent a year and a half of my life on the road working on that record, technical difficulties, and it did the thing. Yeah, I had a momentary radio success with Release It, and that was weird. It was weird to go from clubs putting 100 people in the room to playing to 2,500 to 3,500 people. It was weird.
Yes, absolutely. And did you have quite a change of personnel for that third album? Was there?
I had already, I had been through probably 10 or 15 different band members, but I was trying to surround myself with people that I just liked and that were my friends, and that I knew that could play. And in every case, they would learn quickly how to become performers. I didn't want to hang around with people who just stood there and played.
Yes.
That was my thing. I wanted people who jumped around and brought their big personalities in there. And when you bring people with big personalities, they also bring in ego and ideas and principles and stuff. So that's where the clashes always were. But primarily, if I brought them in as my friend and I didn't rely on them for their musicianship, or it made my job kind of easy. All they had to do was not get thrown in jail or get me thrown in jail, and they were in Hate Department. They just stayed there. And that worked for the better part of the campaign of Hate Department.
Yes, my God, But so how come you didn't go to was Woodstock '99 ever a possibility for the band?
Yeah, Restless pitched us. They pitched us for a lot of festivals. I think we just weren't heavy enough for Woodstock '99. Hate Department was like, we certainly had the energy, but Woodstock '99 was full a lot of new metal, crossover metal kind of stuff.
Yes.
That would have been kind of nuts to play that. We watched the documentary on it, and wow.
So then how do you navigate the millennium? After those 3 albums, you've been nearly 10 years in music, which is quite a good pitch, isn't it? How do you then navigate the sort of follow-up and your next direction?
I wanted at the time that let's say it was a year and a half after the release date of Technical Difficulties. I had met so many other people that were accomplished, and I was already hired to produce other records. People that wanted. And from my visits to Interscope and Capital. I had friends at Capital, Java. I mean, I knew a lot of, and they liked my personality, and they liked my studio personality. Let's just say, and so I wanted to do something different. I met a guy named Eric Valentine who produced the Third Eye Blind record, and he was working on the Smash Mouth record, and he I started listening to that Third Eye Blind record as the last leg of the last tour for Technical Difficulties was winding down. I started listening to that record with different ears. They were like 8 singles in. They were a phenomenally popular band in the United States. Did Third Eye Blind have a European success as well?
They weren't a band that didn't sort of come onto our radar that much, actually.
That's probably a good thing. I'm not being mean towards them, but it was kind of like the early onset of emo rock. But man, was it produced well. It was really recorded well, and the songs were all over the radio here. And my idea about popularity and success and making a living was starting to change. I thought to myself, if I could hang in circles with people that are making records like that first Smash Mouth record, or other friends that I was brought in to press buttons or move faders around, I wanted to hang in those circles. So I really ditched Hate Department after Technical Difficulties. I created a band called Choker, and I wrote 10 songs quickly that were about my marriage that fell apart while I was on the road with Hate Department, and my life that fell apart. When you're on the road for a year and a half, you're not going to survive. Your normal life is going to deteriorate. It's just what happens. And so I wrote 10 songs from kind of that perspective. They were more like crashed love songs. And I was really influenced by the Blue record by Weezer, that Third Eye Blind record, and let's say a bunch of other stuff that was kind of post-punk, things like Quicksand. This is all like American emotional post-punk. And I had so much success with Choker in a very short period of time. In terms of the record industry, I had a deal with Giant within 12 months. So a year after I dissolved Hate Department, at least the idea that I dissolved Hate Department because I was no longer touring, I was back in record labels' offices with Choker talking about a record deal. This was now 2000, 2001, around that time, 2000. And the Sonata, at the same time, the record industry was falling apart at like free fall. It was just, I would go up to a label and the staff would be half of what it was within 3 or 4 weeks. The music industry just collapsed.
And this was the illegal download period, isn't it?
Yes. It was right after the Napster thing, but there was another pirating thing. I forget what it was called, but yeah, it was a mess. Record sales were real. People, I don't think most people don't realize how massive that balloon was of record sales, CD sales, record sales. It's what allowed bands to tour and have ticket prices of $26, because the record industry, they would put bands on the road. They would pay for their transportation and their food because there was so much money being made by record sales. It's ridiculous.
Yes, the champagne cocaine period, wasn't it?
I made 83 cents per record on a record of mine that sold for $12.99. I made 83 cents.
Yes.
So it's okay. I mean, it's okay. It's what it was. We all participated in that. Let's call it a delusion. And it was, so I signed a deal memo with Giant, and then Universal squashed it. So at that time, I didn't really know what I didn't really even know what I wanted to do. I went on tour with Hate Department one more time supporting Ogre. He put out his first solo record, Ogre from Skinny Puppy, which was called Welt. And we supported him on that tour. And that put me back in Hate Department mode. So my idea of being like a alt rocker with a big record deal and doing songs that were capable of getting on the radio got squashed.
My God, it did. Yes, that was Choker gone. So then did you, 2003, did you then bring Hate Department back again? Was that?
Yeah. And I met when I was out with Ogre on tour, I re-met Martin Atkins, and he was a good handshake and such a great personality. And he is a hero of mine. Again, he played drums on that Pill record that was so incredible. I don't think he had done the Killing Joke record, Extremities. I mean, Martin is a hero of mine. Unbelievable musician.
Yes.
And so when the Ogre tour ended, he called me and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about taking Pigface out. You want to come out?" I actually thought he was fucking with me. Like, to be in Pigface, I thought you know what I mean? I thought he was just making a joke. But he wasn't. Like, he got a plane ticket and I flew to Chicago. So in 2003, it was Martin's suggestion. I told him I was kind of on the fence about doing more Hate Department, and he encouraged me to make a Hate Department record. So,
right. Did you meet people like Chris Connolly at this stage, who was sometimes
when I first arrived in Chicago? I mean, granted, I had already like been out with my heroes, right? Ogre was a hero of mine because I went through my Skinny Puppy phase, and Kevin Key played drums for him on that tour. So I was essentially with Skinny Puppy on tour with them. I had already been through that. But when I landed in Chicago for the Pigface thing and when I got off the plane, I was so nervous I threw up. That's how nervous I was.
Right.
To be in their presence. Yeah. So I went into that room and Chris Connolly was there. I met Chris Connolly. I met Meg Lee Chin. Oh gosh, I can't remember that guitar player who played with Rollins' name. He was so wonderful. Everybody met Charles Levi. I met all of these industrial superheroes, not just industrial. It's weird to call Martin industrial superhero. He's a punk rocker all the way to his skeleton.
Yes.
But yeah, I was in the room with all those people. We're a family. When you tour for 5 weeks under those kind of conditions, like a show every night, and these balls to the wall, very sweaty shows, you're a family. And we were for a long time.
Did you ever go into the studio and record anything with them, or was it just live?
No, I did. I recorded. Martin has an unorthodox way of writing Pigface songs. And I think it's kind of, now that I know him, it's kind of an efficient way, because he couldn't really fly 20 people to Chicago and sit in a room with him, could he? That's not how it works.
No.
But he can say, I'm working on a new Pigface record, and everybody he knows sends him bits. You know, they send him songs, they send him things, and he sits there and decides what he likes and decides what he can manipulate into Pigface. And that's the way he's an amazing producer. he's a genius at bringing people together. That formula has gotten more complicated over the years because society and politics of, it's more complicated today. You have to be careful who you put in the room, but he's a brilliant person at putting people in the room and turning out great art. He's
yes,
genius. So yeah, I sent him a Hate Department song called Insects, and he turned it into Insect Suspect. Chris Connolly sang on it, and that was. Meg Lee Chen says it's arguably one of the most popular Pigface songs, and it probably is. It was very popular. There's nothing sounds like that song. He did a great job. It has his signature drum sound on it. Chris Connolly is amazing, an amazing artist. So
yes, absolutely. He was in an amazing band called Finny Tribe. I
know. I saw you. I knew about Finny Tribe. We talked about it quite a bit. And I just saw you interviewed Finny Tribe.
Yes, I know. 3 of the members. They've got a lovely box set coming out. So do check that one out. I know there was an amazing song. I remember John Peel playing "Did Testimony," which is just awesome. But actually, it's just a beautifully put together collection and compilation of stuff. So
we're kind of returning to what you said early on in this conversation. It's an amazing time because I don't really speak with Chris anymore, but I can see that he's able to rekindle that energy that he had in early Finny Tribe. I've seen some of his posts go by about it, and it's a great time to reflect on that early art that you created because you were on fire. He's a very fiery person. So, when he gets into things, he's really into it. So I'm sure that early Finny Tribe stuff was just wide open.
Got it. Yes.
They're all artists. They're all of them.
Amazing. So with that was Easy Listener, and then you bring out another album as Hate Department, don't you, at this stage?
Yes.
Ditch.
Yep. Ditch. And Martin put it out with, so this wasn't, he was restructuring Invisible, and I remember at the time hearing why, but I think he was trying more of a collective idea with Underground Inc. It was what he had there, and so he put that record out with Underground Inc. And I didn't support that record. Like I didn't tour on Ditch. I didn't really want to. I wanted to do other things. And one of those things was Martin and I had started recording some demos that we didn't really know what we were going to do with. And it was only when Chris Connolly came in and started singing on them that we realized that it could be a Damage Manual record. So Damage Manual was Martin Atkins, Chris Connolly, Geordie Walker, and Jaw Wobble.
Wow.
Yeah. And they had success. I think their first record came out in 96. Gosh, Chris Connolly and Martin made an amazing record called Murder Inc. Paul Raven played bass on it. That's some of Chris's best work. And then his other best work is the record I made with him. that Damage Manual record is really special. It's called Limited Edition. And all of us, everybody, it's all of our best. Martin just played his ass off on it. We did interesting things in the studio. We treated it like a canvas, the whole thing. And that was a really special time. We all got along really well. And so I was happy to be involved with that, very honored. Because even though I wasn't filling Geordie's shoes, because Geordie was alive and Jaw, I think this was a period where maybe Martin and Jaw just weren't really talking all that much.
Right.
I know Jaw's he's an unusual guy, like an unusual character, maybe a little temperamental, personality-wise, and so is I am too, but so he wasn't involved. So I covered bass and guitar on that one, then a lot of songwriting. And
so the recommendation, do check out that album then. That's
you'll love it because it's right up your alley.
Excellent.
It's not as dark and heavy as much as it is kind of just jangly and poppy, and it's some of Chris's best work for sure. It's really cool.
Excellent. Well, I'll definitely check that out. He's got an amazing voice. So then, how do you feel the rest of the O years? The kind of
I didn't want to put out after Ditch and the Damage Manual thing, a little bit more touring with Pigface. I just really wanted to do something different that wasn't industrial. I'm not really sure what my industrial music kind of split off into two different things: electro industrial, which was kind of more this post Depeche Mode, what they started calling EBM.
yes.
Is dance floor music. Nothing against it, but I wasn't really into that crooning, four on the floor, big synth pad. It really wasn't my interest. In fact, I kind of made fun of it quite often. And I also didn't like the other side. I didn't really like the real boxy, screaming rock, so I wasn't interested in it. I met my wife really in Pigface. She was on Martin's label, and she had a band called Voodoo, and she was brought into Pigface. And we on that first tour, which was United 2, we just built a really solid friendship that like I'd never had before. I didn't ever have a friendship with someone like that. We just really clicked on so many ways. And so I wanted to be with her. So I moved to North Carolina, and we subsequently got married and do everything together. So during the rest of the O years, when I was living in North Carolina, I did things like I created like a hillbilly punk band called Super Sport. And she was the singer of that. And the bass player in that band had been the bass player for Megley Chin as well. And we had this really wild Keith Moon-like drummer. So, but that was just wide open rock and roll with
and what's your wife's name?
Michelle. She was Michelle Walters back then, back in Voodoo. And I want to say they got signed in 2002, 2003. Maybe 2003 to Martin's label.
Right.
And they toured. She was a Bomb Gang girl with My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult when their bands were on tour together. And so there was a lot of crossover members there. Charles had been in Thrill Kill, and he was also in Pigface. And I'm not really. I don't regret getting away from the scene. Like I think it was I was just finding it to be more and more cliquey and possibly more and more political, and I wasn't comfortable there. So I just wanted to do something different. And that's a long time to not do anything. Even though Super Sport, I mean, oh man, those were like really real punk shows. Like we had throwing the beer bottle thing went in Super Sport. It was really fun, but it didn't last very long. So I wasn't really even motivated to make a record again until like 2015, another Hate Department records. That's 10 years.
Yes, that's a long time. Was it a bit of an existential crisis, or sort of just boredom, or?
No, we lost someone in the scene who was a really key figure. Jamie Duffy was a Chicago local that had been a founding member in Acumen. He was a sound man on the Pigface tours. He was just like the most lovable people ever knew. He was just a wonderful guy. Well, when he died, there was a big memorial show for him in Chicago that was thrown by his best friends, and it was called Cold Waves, that is now like that's a seminal event every year. So the Novak brothers and his friends put on this show and I played. They invited Hate Department to play because we all came up in the same circles. And when I played that show, I walked away motivated to make a new record.
Right, my God, that was something else, wasn't it? Yes, it's often quite humbling when people start dying, isn't it? You kind
Yeah,
of,
yeah, we talked about this too, maybe even before you hit record, is you remember you remember what you loved about people, and you remember what you loved about the scene, and you remember what you love about music, and getting up on that stage and singing Hate Department songs. Uh, like Hate Department is always kind of like I'm an anarchist through and through. Just don't believe in state control at all. And all of my songs are very egoist. I'm a very strong proponent of individual strength and power, and my songs, even though they're angry, they're about self release. It's about self empowerment. Most of my songs, my titles are about self empowerment. So to get up on stage in front of an audience and sing those songs again, I remembered what motivated me to be Hate Department. It's a long time. That's 10 years.
yes, absolutely. No,
And
that's
I've been
that's
playing punk songs too. When Supersport was a punk band, it was great and fun. I was in a band with my wife. Crazy about my wife. She's an awesome singer. But to go sing those Hate Department songs and remember what motivated me. I, yeah. So I made New Ghost.
that
That
was
came out in 2016.
yes. You had actually Charles Hunt's been on quite a lot of your records, though, hasn't he?
Yeah, he doesn't play with me now, but he played with me, toured with me so long too. He was the first like real drummer after I brought my drummer in from my previous band, but he had health issues. But Charles Hunt was a key guy. He played toured with me like crazy. And then I lived in Indiana because we chased my wife's mom up to the Midwest. And I put together a band of people from Indiana. A guy named Nick Mead was really instrumental in helping me build a band because he was in the area and he knew a lot of people and he was a great, terrific musician. And he was a great help to me to put new people in the mix. I can do everything myself and I like doing everything myself, but I liked his energy, I liked his playing, and I like getting people involved.
Yes, absolutely. So that was so then, but you then didn't sort of keep. Did you keep Hate Department going after that, or did it sort of drop
No,
away?
no, we did. I didn't do an actual tour. I turned into a festival guy. I hate that because um, I'm finding that I already had made up my mind that I didn't really want to play festivals anymore because I don't like the idea of my peers and friends and acquaintances paying like $100 for a ticket to stand in a room on a concrete floor for 8 hours to see 12 bands that all have the same stage setup and the same backdrop. And I find it kind of that, but that's really where a scene for this style of music is now. Is very few bands actually tour and do the in the United States, you're going to do this big figure eight because of the geography of it.
Yes.
Very few bands have the financial fortitude to accomplish that. I mean, you have to go on with a band that's kind of more in this nostalgia column, the Skinny Puppies, or the you have to be you have to be able to put a lot of people in the room to pull it off financially. Um,
Yes. This
these
is tricky.
festivals are what's up. They're 10, 20, 40 bands in a weekend. Nothing against it. I'm glad that they exist, and I'm glad that the communities come together, because that's the best part about Cold Waves and Dark Forest Festival is they've got these incredible communities and supporters. That's awesome. But really, even though I agree to them, that's not how I want to perform. I want to put on a Hate Department show with a few, maybe two, three other bands, and have it be like an old school show.
Yes, I know. I mean, I did like festivals in the 80s. I went to Glastonbury quite a lot, but then you just think, God, I can't do this anymore. And it's and actually just don't really get around to seeing the bands because you're just feeling so shattered by the duration of it. But yes, I can see in America there's some massive festivals that go through. Yes.
It seems like every major city in the United States now has their own annual festival where they bring in. It's I'm not exaggerating. It's like 50 bands. I mean,
Yes.
there's these key bands that Metallica or the Misfits reunion or oh my god, it's okay. It's the reality. So I don't want to seem like the old man and go, that sucks because I'm not gonna pay that money to stand on my feet for 12 hours. Sorry.
No, and
There's no,
you know, and to be honest, when I see little clips that people post up of their moment at a festival, I think, God, that looks so miserable, and there's just no energy and atmosphere, and you kind of want to be 16, 18 year again, all cramped in a little space with it boiling hot and being sort of really up close to the artist. And I know that's just
I still
nostalgia.
go. This is. I'm being honest. Michelle and I have gone to more shows in the last 12 months than we have in the previous 5 years to those kinds of shows. We go to 100-seat shows, we go to 300-seat shows, and they're sold out. And that's the best energy. You kind of like fight your way to the front of the stage. I'm an old man now, but still, I'm really love music that I love.
Yes, well, absolutely. No, it's nice. We've still got this little art centre, and that's just the place that you'd want to go and see a band. And yes, you can sort of, get quite close. And
Close, you can reach out, they touch your hands, and you get sweaty and you dance your ass off. But it's an hour, it's a 3 hour event total. It doesn't give you some horrible fatigue that's just, and you don't even know who you saw after five bands, you know. So yeah, I love going to shows, I love going to concerts, and I don't even have to say I miss it because I've seen some incredible shows, but they were just normal shows. They were like
yes,
for three.
absolutely. So then what's been the last 10 years then? Are you still involved with music? Is it
Oh yeah,
still?
yeah, very much. I'm working on New Hate Department now. I agreed to do a festival. It didn't unfold that way. So Hate Department's not going to play this festival, and also I'm just going to turn this into a promotion for his thing. Martin is doing a show in November where he's playing that whole Killing Joke record, Extremities, and he's putting together a band to play those songs of so when Paul Raven, gosh, I don't even remember. It's been 11 years, something like that. Paul Raven's been dead for over a decade, and losing Geordie last year, that's hard. Losing Killing Joke's difficult. That was big influence for me. It was a huge part of Martin's life. So he's going to go play those songs in Chicago in November. I had been doing that with him, like putting that together and playing with him, but I'm not involved with that anymore. So I'm very much doing music, but I'm trying to navigate the landscape myself. The smart thing for me to do right now is put new Hate Department material out, because I've created some conversations, with being involved with just talking about music and being out there, being who I am. The way for me to best put my message out is with new Hate Department stuff.
And have you written the material? Have you started?
Yeah, I'm 5 song. I want to release a six song thing, because I talked about it years ago. Just because it's the 6th album, I'm going to put 6 songs out. But I have all 6 songs now, and I'm just kind of producing all. It's not smart to produce 6 songs at the same time, because that means all 6 move slowly. The smart thing to do is produce, finish one, create your mixes, and then move on to the next. But I'm trying to do what I always do, which is create kind of a story with what I'm doing. So yeah, I've got 5 of the 6 all at a boil.
Right. So it's kind of. And do you record it? Have you got your own studio at home?
Yes. Yeah. It was part. I kind of always have. even when we lived in the woods in North Carolina, we built out a garage and had a studio out there where Super Sport would rehearse and record. And my wife bought a school in Ohio, and one of the classrooms is a studio. And I'm still a producer for hire. I engineer and mix. I'm working on 2 records right now that are not my own. They're artists.
Right. I often wonder how artists. I mean, I spoke to somebody the other day who's a guitarist who's done, various bands. He's now in Atomic Rooster, but he said he had a period where he just went and bust because he just needed some cash between gigs. And I just wonder how musicians deal with those downtimes and keep it going.
We don't. When Michelle and I toured in Pigface and the tour ended, we went back to North Carolina. We were so poor, we had to sell our shoes. Are you in here? we
were living in my mom's basement.
We were living in her mom's basement. We sold our touring shoe boots. We had cool shoes to be on stage. And we got the idea that we could buy cool shoes from thrift stores and sell them on eBay. That set the wheel in motion for us to make our own way, one way or another, outside of music, because music was not profitable for Michelle. Music was not profitable for me, even though during the technical difficulty time, there was so much money. There was a lot of money, and it was an expensive time. Yes. And I made money producing records. I made an Information Society record too. I mean, I got paid pretty well for that as well. So, but by that time, we had nothing. We were really living on Michelle's mom's kind of courtesy, but we figured it out though. Michelle's very clever, and we kept making new businesses and the downside about working for yourself in the United States is that you basically sign up to be on call 24 hours a day. Nothing about your life ever gets to be normal, because if you don't jump up and address the issue, that means you're not going to make enough money to live in the United States.
Yes. So it's
an expensive place.
Well, yes, yes, it's amazing. So when are we hoping to see this project come out, the new album?
Wouldn't you say that considering that my involvement with this Extremities project kind of just fell apart, and then I am not going to play on this festival in May next year, the smartest thing for me to do would be put out a single as quickly as I could. I'm going to need to wrap up one of these songs and put it out within a month, and then before the end of the year, or maybe by January, because I don't think it's smart to put stuff out before Christmas, because everybody's mind is in a different place.
Yes.
But in January to release the other 5 songs. So I've got my 6th Hate Department release of all 6 songs. That's my plan right now, would be, I'm telling you this. I haven't even told Michelle this, but that's my plan.
That's the plan. What are you?
Is to put out a single as quickly as I can, because I've got a lot of people's attention right now. A lot of people are talking, and that's a good thing. I love that people are communicating, even if it's hot. Put out a song quickly, and then release the other 5 in January.
Excellent. This is all very exciting.
Yeah, and then if I could do regional tours in the United States at my age and with my circle, I'd be very happy to do that. Touring the whole country right now, unless I miraculously write a song that gets me all kinds of like viral attention, you can't count on that or bank on that. It's not really in the cards for me to tour the country. You know what I mean? I don't want to go play 40 shows for $400 and come back $1,500 in debt. I don't want to do that.
No, that would be very hard work, wouldn't it? Very hard work.
Fun. I love seeing the country. I love driving. I love people. I love the handshake part of music. But I've already done that stuff. I'd rather hang out with Michelle and my dogs and the cats, and we got pet pet rats. She just said make decent money at home. That's the reality.
Yes, I know. This is always the thing, isn't it, really? Do you get sort of, because in this country, we can vaguely, if we've contributed, get retirement pay about 67. What does it work? How does it work in America? Do you have a...
It's similar. There's what do they call it? Yeah, when you work for yourself, you're not going to get that. So you have to pay into the system. And we've been together a long time. We've always worked. What do they call? What is that retirement called? Social Security. It's called Social Security.
Right.
And not to mention, oh my gosh, I'm sure you follow the news enough to know that whole system is in a terrible state. They're saying that by 2030, Social Security is going to be bankrupt.
Yeah, I think, yes, they're sort of going blimey. I think, yes, the retirement age will have to creep up for the next generation. I don't want to tell them that, but I think it's like, because it went up from 66 to 67 in this country. So it's like, oh, well, that's not too bad. But I think, gosh, I'm not sure, because there's such an aging population, isn't it? So there's like the mass.
Country. There's all kinds of stuff going on in the world. You hear what's going on in Japan is very curious. There's such low reproduction rates. There's not enough people to take care of the generations that are aging out.
Yes, this is true in this country, isn't it? Yeah.
And then, like I said, I'm not apolitical, but I have my views. I feel like we're at an intersection with, let's say, government. Authority and government, where there's going to be a very great realization by 2030 to 2035, where people are going to have to recognize that the people that are running the show and supposedly protecting us have done just such a poor job of managing money and social structures that people are going to have to get more involved in their neighborhoods and in their communities and in their circles. You can't really just look to the nicely coiffed hair and the $1 billion campaigns. Those people aren't working for you. They're working for themselves. So I think
yes.
the great realization is going to be that communities are going to have to come back into focus for survival, just for plain survival.
Yes, this is all very, yes. So are you on the East Coast now, he says?
The Midwest. Well, and we have a little...
considered East. This is still considered.
Is it still considered? I guess East Coast. Yeah, we're on the Eastern time zone. So
where's your nearest city, or are you in the nearest city?
Columbus, Ohio.
Oh.
And then Louisville, Cincinnati. Cincinnati's not far.
Right. God,
I'm about 5 hours from Chicago, about 45 minutes from Columbus, an hour from Cincinnati. The Midwest is very central to a lot of cities.
Yes.
Which is good and bad.
Because a couple of months ago, I did an interview with a guy called Raymond Watts, who was in a band called Pig.
Yeah.
God, he's amazing. He's still alive. Are you amazed that you're still alive?
He's such a captivating guy. I think his charisma like flies out of the screen. But he was in KMFDM. He's been in a lot of projects, had a lot of success of his own. So, and he's a cool guy.
He's a very cool guy. Yes, no, I just remember that. But I was just, things keep trumping in my mind after speaking to you. It's like,
where does Raymond live?
Well, I think he was in the UK when I spoke to him. I'm pretty sure, but
he's a UK guy, yeah.
Yeah, and he'd been in a very interesting little indie, almost acoustic indie band in the very early time called Hit Parade, and it was just extraordinary that he started that and then sort of very much veered into a completely different sort of musical style. But he was delightful. What
too, about him is he. I don't like the word niche, but he has created and manifested his own audience that is really, it is a lot like his own version of KMFDM's audience. He's got a very loyal fan base and he calls his own shots. And I love that kind of independence in an artist. He really thinks and acts for himself. And I really respect him for that.
Yes, I think he's got some shows coming up, actually, just having a look.
Yeah, he does.
So he's still doing it. Well, look, thank you ever so much for your time. This has been amazing. If you want, I can always send you, you'll be able to find it as well.
Oh,
The
I
link
will. I saved the page. I found you. I found you.
You found
I'll
me.
watch for it.
I'm there.
Maybe send me a note when you've had it, you edit it and you put it up.
Yes, well, I will. And, people always love to hear these things from all over the world. But thank you again for your time. This has been amazing. And, I've really loved listening to the music over the last couple of weeks. And it's been fantastic. But I'll definitely go and check out those more obscure albums that
Yeah,
I slightly
do. Please do. Yeah, I know you'll enjoy them. All right, David,
Yes.
please take care of yourself. It's been delightful.
Yes. And thank you, Michelle. Take care.
Oh, bye, David.
Bye.
Bye. Take care of yourselves. Have a nice evening. I'm going to bed.
Oh, good.
Take care. Bye. Oh. And that, dear listener, as you guessed, is the end of the interview. A massive thank you to Stephen for giving me the time for that. This has been the C86 Show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on any of the social media platform sites. Just do C86 Show. I'm sure you'll discover me. And all these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes and Podbean. It's true. Have a great week. Stay safe.